In this video, I'm going to show you how to install the Grannas Racing 8.8 kit for the Toyota Supra and Lexus SC300. So these are the kit components. You have a rear cage, and that is the last step in the kit as far as mounting goes. Then you have the cast aluminum cover with the load bolts, and these load bolts here, and then this is the hardware that comes from the factory with this cast cover. Then you have the front mount hardware, and then you have the hardware that I provide for the cage that sits on top of the cover. But the first step is we're going to be installing this cover first and getting the load bolts set. So I'm going to show you here, this cover has what's called load bolts. And these are really important for these 8.8 rear ends. And for the drag racing guys, these are big. So if you go out and look at all the really nice covers that come for the 8.8, they all have these load bolts. And what they do, so we take it here and we hold this up, you'll see that these load bolts kind of correspond with the main caps in the rear. And what they do is they put a little bit of pressure on the back of the main caps to keep that from squashing out and becoming egg-shaped during like hard acceleration or during a launch. So these are really important, and I'm going to show you how to set these up first. Okay, so here we have the cover sitting on top of the diff, and the first thing I do is I back these load bolts all the way out towards myself. So we want to have them all the way up to where they're in the fully recessed position. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take 4 of the silver bolts that come from the factory with this cover, and we're going to install them into the positions right here on the left side of the cover, those 2 bolt holes right there that you see, and then on the other side in those 2. And we're going to torque that down. Right now we're not going to put any silicone on the diff because we're going to be pulling this back off again. But what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and install that cover on there with those 4 bolts, torque those 4 bolts down, and then we're going to set the load bolts. Okay, so now that I have these 4 bolts torqued down to about 25 foot-pounds, remember not to go too crazy because this is an aluminum case. The next step then is to take these load bolts down until they're hand tight. And we're not going to go real crazy, so I'm just going to take this Allen wrench here, and I'm going to get my load bolt to where it's snug up against on each side. And I'm just going to take my Allen and just hand tight. Don't be too crazy with this. We don't want to get too tight. We don't want it to put too much pressure on there. And then what we do is we spin these locking nuts down. And then you take a 3/4 inch socket and tighten these guys. And what that's going to do is it's going to lock our load bolts in place so that they are done, because when we put the cage on, you cannot get to those load bolts. So it's important that we get to the load bolts now, get them set up, and then we're going to install the cage next. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So one thing I forgot to mention, and because this is just a temporary install and I'm not doing this permanently for my own personal car, the one thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to put silicone sealant on those load bolts, and that keeps the fluid from coming back out of the cover. So you want to do that before you tighten those down so that you have a good seal there. And then I'm not going to do it in this video, but now that the cover's back off and the load bolts are set, you're going to want to put silicone, of course, around the main seal area of the diff. So the case needs to be sealed up properly. I'm not going to do that in this video, but now I'm going to go ahead and install that cage and show you how that works. Okay, so now you can see the cage is installed over top of the cover, and I used the longer hardware that I provide, the socket head bolts there. And you can see that the cover itself can only go in one way, and you can tell by looking up underneath here, the fill hole has a little piece cut out specifically for that access, and then your drain hole, of course, is down here, and you have a little recess there in the outer ring of the cage. So again, 25 foot-pounds for these bolts around the edge. Don't forget the silicone, the cover on before you do that. So the last step then is just to put the stub ends in, smack them in place, put the front mount on, and this thing can go up in a car. So this is the front mount, and it has 2 sets of hardware, 2 bolts, and this is the way it's set up. So if we're looking at it this way, this is how it's going to be actually installed. So we have one fender washer up top, then we have the 2 large 1/4-inch washers, another fender washer, and a lock washer, and then the nut goes on the bottom. So it's going to be installed this way on each side. So we're going to go ahead and do that, torque down that bolt, and we should be good. Okay, so the front mount is installed, and you can see how those washers stack up underneath. And then on top we just have the single fender washer. So this is really it. This is it. It's 100% together. It'll bolt right in. You'll have 2 nuts and 2 washers to put on back here. And that's pretty much it. And then of course the bolts that go up into the stock subframe. But other than that, that's it. I mean, it's ready to go. So it's a pretty simple install. And what's really great about these 8.8 diffs is this case right here is from a 2007 to 2010 Explorer. You can pick these up for anywhere from like $150 to $250 at a local junkyard. And then you can put a gear and a LSD in it. The gears are about $180, and like the True Track diffs, they're about $450. So you can have a really well built rear end, you know, for under $1,000 pretty much. So there it is. That's the complete kit, and I'm showing it with the axles here. Those axles in the picture or in that you see right now, they're called the stock outer with the level 5 bar. So that'll save about $400 if you want to send in your stock axles to get remade into these. And they come with the 8.8 stubs there, as you can see. The next step up would be the level 5 axles, and they're basically the same exact thing, except you get a billet outer rather than you reusing the stock ones. And then the biggest upgrade is the pro level axles, and they're a heavier bar, everything billet, inner, the stub, outer, and then you get a hub that you put into the spindle of your car as well. So it has an upgraded billet hub as well.